Imagine you buy a house, right? And the foundation is just completely crumbling.
Oh, like massive structural cracks.
Exactly. Massive cracks, the floors are sagging, the whole thing is just shifting. But instead of, calling a structural engineer to actually dig up the dirt and pour concrete, you decide to just buy a really expensive, beautiful coat of paint for the living room.
Right, you just paint over the cracks and say, there, fixed it.
Yeah. You stand back and think you've solved the problem, but it's a totally cosmetic fix.
Well, it looks fantastic for maybe a week, and then the first strong wind hits, and the whole house just collapses.
Exactly. And we love a cosmetic fix, because it's visible, it's fast, and it doesn't require us to do any of the grueling, unseen work down in the dirt.
Right, the real foundational stuff is hard.
It is. And that obsession with quick fixes, surface level hacks, overnight personality techniques, that is exactly what we're tearing down today. Welcome to the deep dive. If you're someone who loves to learn quickly but thoroughly without, getting bogged down by information overload, you are in the right place.
We've got a really great one today.
We do. We are unpacking one of the absolute titans of personal development. I'm talking about Stephen Covey's 25 million copy bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
A total classic.
Yeah.
But, we're not just skimming the dust jacket here.
No, definitely not. We're pulling from a massive stack of sources today. We've got comprehensive summaries of the original text. You've got deep dives on his specific frameworks like the time management matrix and the emotional bank account.
Which are fascinating on their own, yeah.
Yeah, and we're also looking at insights into his later sequel, The Eighth Habit, plus this really highly analytical secular critique by Sean Powery.
It's such a necessary deep dive because, with 25 million copies sold,
Yeah.
his concepts have just totally permeated our culture.
Oh, absolutely. They're everywhere.
But the problem is,
Yeah.
they often get watered down into these hollow corporate buzzwords. So our mission here is to strip away all that jargon, extract the absolute best, most actionable nuggets, and really examine them critically.
Right, so you get the full, unfiltered picture of what genuine, lasting effectiveness actually looks like. And to get there, we have to start with that crumbling foundation we were just talking about.
The inside-out approach.
Exactly. Covey argues that true success requires an inside-out approach. You can't just adopt some smooth communication tactics, the paint, basically, and expect to build lasting trust if your core character is compromised.
It's think of it like a smartphone, right?
Okay, yeah.
You can download all the flashy productivity apps you want, but if the core operating system is glitchy and corrupted, the phone is still going to crash.
Yeah.
You have to update the underlying OS first.
I love that analogy, and that underlying OS is your character. And Covey illustrates how we mismanage this by pointing to Aesop's fable of the goose that laid the golden eggs.
Right, a classic.
Yeah, the farmer gets this goose that produces solid gold eggs. But he gets greedy, right? He gets impatient. He wants all the gold right now, so he literally cuts open the goose, only to find nothing inside.
He completely destroys the asset that was producing the wealth.
Yeah.
Just because he's so obsessed with the immediate output.
Which perfectly sets up Covey's core definition of effectiveness. He calls it the PPC balance.
Right, production versus production capability.
Exactly. P is production. The golden eggs, the quarterly earnings, the immediate results. PC is production capability, the health of the goose. So, your physical health, your team's morale, your relationships.
And we sacrifice the goose constantly.
Right.
Because human psychology naturally prioritizes immediate measurable rewards, right?
Oh, for sure.
The golden egg is tangible, you can hold it. But the health of the goose is invisible, at least until the goose drops dead.
Yeah, people will work 20-hour days to get a promotion, which is the golden egg. But in the process, they completely destroy their physical health and their marriage.
Exactly. Effectiveness isn't just about output. It's the strict, non-negotiable balance between short-term results and long-term sustainability.
And building that sustainability requires a massive psychological shift, which brings us to what the sources call the maturity continuum. This was actually a huge paradigm shift for me.
Whoa, it's foundational. He breaks human growth into 3 distinct stages.
Right. First is dependence. You rely on others for everything. The mindset is basically, you take care of me, or you are to blame if things go wrong.
Then comes independence.
Yeah.
The mindset shifts to, I can do it. I am responsible.
But our culture often stops there, right? Like treating rugged independence as the ultimate finish line.
It's a huge cultural blind spot. I mean, independence is vital, obviously, but it is not the peak. The peak is interdependence, the idea of we can combine our talents to create something greater together.
Right, but here's the really critical mechanism. You cannot skip steps.
No, not at all.
True interdependence requires a foundation of absolute independence first. Like, you can't be a genuinely great collaborator if you are secretly dependent on your colleagues for emotional validation, you know?
Or if you constantly blame external factors when things get hard.
Exactly. So how do we build that unbreakable independence? That's the first phase of this journey, what Covey calls the private victory. And it starts with habit 1, be proactive.
And we hear the word proactive thrown around constantly as just like taking initiative, like volunteering for a project at work.
Right, but the psychological depth of this principle is entirely different.
It really is. It's rooted in this profound observation about human agency. The idea that between any stimulus and your response, there is a space.
A space.
And in that space lies your freedom and power to choose. Proactive people recognize this space. They focus entirely on their circle of control.
So when they face a terrible boss or a bad economy or, a canceled flight, they don't waste emotional calories complaining.
Because those things are completely outside their control. They focus their energy purely on how they choose to respond to those external realities.
They act rather than being acted upon.
Yeah.
But, once you realize you actually have the steering wheel, you have to know where you are driving, which introduces habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
The principle of intentionality.
Yeah, that all things are created twice. There is a mental creation, the blueprint, and then the physical creation, the actual building. It's the classic carpenter's rule, right?
Measure twice, cut once.
Exactly, because without that mental blueprint, you risk falling into this really tragic trap that highly ambitious people fall into.
Oh, climbing the ladder of success,
Yeah.
only to reach the top and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall.
Yes. It's so devastating. If you don't take the time to explicitly define your own deeply held values and your end goals, society or your family or your company will gladly define them for you.
Absolutely. So, okay, you've taken responsibility for your responses,
Yeah.
and you've figured out exactly which wall your ladder should be leaning against.
Right.
Now comes the execution. Habit 3. But first things first. This is entirely about time management, but not time management in the sense of cramming more tasks into a day,
No, it's about prioritizing what actually matters. This is where we look at the time management matrix.
which categorizes everything we do by 2 metrics, urgency and importance.
Most of us live our entire lives reacting to urgency. Quadrant 1 is urgent and important. So crises, immediate deadlines, literal fires.
And then quadrant 3 is urgent, but not important. Most emails, interruptions, other people's minor emergencies that kind of masquerade as your problem.
Right, and then we get so exhausted by those 2 quadrants, we escape to quadrant 4. Not urgent and not important. Mindless doom scrolling, binge watching TV.
Which leaves quadrant 2. Important, but not urgent. Long-term planning, relationship building, exercise, deep learning.
And the research argues that highly effective people aggressively minimize time in the reactive quadrants and live in quadrant 2. But I actually have to push back on the expert here. Yeah, because reading through this, living in quadrant 2 sounds like an absolute luxury. How can anyone ignore the immediate fires of quadrant 1? Like, if I'm at work and the main server crashes, I can't just ignore it and say, sorry, I'm doing some long-term strategic vision boarding right now.
Right, yeah. That is the exact friction most people feel. But it fundamentally misunderstands the mechanics of cause and effect.
How so?
The goal isn't to ignore a burning fire in quadrant 1. The insight is realizing that investing time in quadrant 2 actually prevents the fires from starting in the first place.
Oh, interesting.
Think of it like medical care. Going to the emergency room for a heart attack is quadrant 1. Eating well and exercising is quadrant 2.
Ah, okay. So if you spend time in Q2 doing proper system maintenance on your server, which is important but not urgent today, it never crashes tomorrow.
Precisely. You aren't just getting better at holding a fire hose, you are building fireproof walls. Q2 activities are preventative. The more time you invest there, the smaller your quadrant 1 naturally becomes over time.
That makes a lot of sense. And mastering these personal habits gives you that private victory. You are now truly independent, which means you are finally structurally sound enough to build the public victory, achieving interdependence.
And transitioning from dealing with ourselves to dealing with others introduces one of the most powerful metaphors in the entire stack, The emotional bank account.
It completely reframes how we view trust.
It does. Trust isn't static.
Hmm.
It operates exactly like a financial account. Every single interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal.
So deposits are things like keeping commitments, clarifying expectations, apologizing sincerely when you mess up.
And withdrawals are disrespect, breaking promises, or, just assuming you know what someone meant without even asking.
And there was a really specific statistic that stood out to me from Dr. John Gottman. He found that to maintain a healthy relationship, you don't just need a one-to-one balance. You actually need a 4-to-1 ratio.
Wow, 4-to-1.
Yeah, 4 positive deposits for every 1 negative withdrawal. And the psychology behind that is fascinating. Human evolution basically wired our brains to hold on to negative interactions, which historically meant danger, much more strongly than positive ones.
Which is exactly why an overdrawn account is so toxic.
Mhm.
If your balance is negative, every single word you say is filtered through a lens of suspicion.
Right, you could say good morning, and they will wonder what your hidden agenda is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you have a massive surplus of trust, communication is incredibly efficient. You can stumble, you can make a mistake, and the relationship easily absorbs it because the reserve is there.
And with a high balance account, you can effectively step into conflict resolution, which brings us to habit 4. Think win-win.
And the texts make it very clear. This is not about being a pushover. It is mechanically defined as a delicate balance between courage and consideration.
Meaning you need the courage to forcefully speak up for your own needs, combined with the genuine consideration to care about the other person's needs.
Right. But to pull this off, you really have to overcome a massive psychological hurdle, which is the scarcity mindset.
Oh, right. Because evolutionarily, we are wired to view resources as finite. If you get a piece of the pie, my piece gets smaller.
Yeah, but win-win demands an abundance mindset.
Hmm.
The belief that through creative cooperation, we can actually just bake a bigger pie.
But you can't bake that pie if you don't know what the other person wants.
Yeah.
Which is where I think most of us fail spectacularly. And this brings us to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Empathetic listening.
Yeah, and honestly, this is my biggest personal struggle. When someone comes to me with a problem, my brain instantly wants to solve it. I want to jump in with the logic, the fix.
Well, we all do. We listen not with the intent to understand, but with the intent to reply.
Exactly.
The sources connect this to a brilliant sequence from Greek philosophy: ethos, pathos, and logos.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure, ethos is your personal credibility. Pathos is empathy, the emotional alignment. And logos is the logic and the reasoning. Notice the order there.
Right, you cannot skip to the end. But most of us jump straight to logos. We just barrage people with logic and facts and solutions before establishing any emotional connection or confirming that we actually understand the depth of their problem.
It's the equivalent of walking into a doctor's office, and
Uh-huh.
before you even sit down or open your mouth, the doctor just hands you a prescription.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You wouldn't trust that doctor at all. And you wouldn't take that medicine, even if it happened to be exactly what you needed.
Diagnosing must precede prescribing. Always.
Yeah.
When you take the time to genuinely listen and repeat back someone's perspective so well that they say, yes, that's exactly how I feel, the resistance drops.
And when that resistance drops, you open the door to habit 6. Synergize.
Synergy.
Now, I know synergy has become like the ultimate hollow corporate buzzword, but the mechanical reality of it is actually incredible. It's the idea that when differences are genuinely valued rather than just tolerated, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It can equal 3 or 10.
It is the ultimate manifestation of interdependence. Think about it. If two people agree on absolutely everything, one of them is unnecessary.
Right. Synergy is what happens when, say, a brilliant engineer and a brilliant designer stop fighting over compromises and instead merge their vastly different perspectives to create a completely new third alternative, like the first touchscreen smartphone.
But it's vital to understand the causality here. You cannot reach synergy without the trust of the emotional bank account, the intent of win-win, and the empathy of deep listening. The sequence is rigid.
So you build this incredible capacity, but the world changes, you change, and entropy is always pulling at us. You don't just achieve these states and retire.
No, you have to maintain the machine.
Right. And that requires habit 7, sharpen the saw, which is beautifully illustrated by the story of the woodcutter.
Yeah, imagine walking through a forest and seeing a man feverishly sawing down a tree. He's sweating, he's exhausted, he's making almost no progress.
And you say, why don't you stop for a few minutes and sharpen that saw? It would go so much faster.
And he snaps back. I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy sawing.
And we've all been that woodcutter, right? We get so caught up in the urgency of the task that we neglect the instrument doing the work ourselves.
Exactly. And the framework breaks this renewal into four dimensions: physical, spiritual, social, emotional, and mental.
And the mental dimension really jumped out in the texts. There is a strong warning against trading the classroom for the TV set once formal schooling ends.
It requires serious discipline to bypass the easy dopamine of screens for deep reading, study, and continuous mental friction.
It is the ultimate quadrant 2 activity. If you aren't actively sharpening the mental blade, it is dulling. There is no neutral state.
No neutral state at all. And speaking of not staying static, Covey himself didn't stop at Seven Habits.
Right, because the original book came out and then the world shifted heavily into the information age, complexity skyrocketed, and 15 years later he published a sequel, The Eighth Habit.
Because the baseline shifted. Effectiveness was no longer enough to thrive. The new requirement was greatness.
And the eighth habit is framed as find your voice and inspire others to find theirs.
And voice isn't just about speaking loudly. It's defined very specifically as the exact intersection of four elements: your talent, your passion, a distinct human need, and your conscience.
So it's about taking all that raw effectiveness you built in the first 7 habits and pointing it toward a calling that actually serves humanity.
Exactly. Think of a highly effective corporate accountant who realizes their true voice isn't just maximizing shareholder value, but using that exact same financial literacy to restructure a struggling nonprofit that feeds their community.
Talent, passion, need, and conscience all aligning. It's a profound evolution from personal utility to broader contribution. But, as comprehensive and universally adopted as these frameworks are, it's our job on this deep dive to look at the whole picture.
Yes, absolutely.
And that brings us to a really fascinating structural critique of where these principles actually come from. We really need to look at the secular critique provided by Sean Powery.
And to do this, we have to contextualize the author a bit. Stephen Covey was a deeply devout, prominent Mormon.
Right. In fact, 7 years before the 7 Habits blew up, he wrote a book called The Divine Center. It was intended specifically for an LDS audience, and it contained a lot of the same core concepts.
So Powery, analyzing the work from a secular atheist perspective, makes the case that the 7 Habits is essentially a secularized distillation of those religious teachings.
And his main critique is that the book still carries some philosophical baggage from that worldview. For instance, Covey frequently points to God as the ultimate source of these principles.
Powery also highlights a moment in the 2004 foreword where Covey laments that modern culture is falling victim to growing secularism and cynicism. He basically lumps those two concepts together as if they are the same thing.
Which is a significant philosophical conflation, right? Secularism is simply a framework for understanding the world without religious dogma. It has nothing to do with cynicism.
Not at all. You can be deeply secular and incredibly compassionate, finding profound meaning in science, art, and human connection without an ounce of cynicism.
Powery suggests Covey was likely aiming at nihilism or meaninglessness, but used the one secularism because of his specific religious lens.
But what I found most interesting is Powery's challenge to the nature of the principles themselves. Covey often frames things like being proactive or integrity as divine creations.
Right, but Powery argues that they aren't mandates handed down from above. They are simply natural laws of human behavior and causality observed over thousands of years.
Yeah, if you prepare meticulously, you get better results. Fortune favors the prepared mind. It's basic cause and effect, requiring no divine origin whatsoever.
It's a crucial distinction because it shifts the authority from theology to psychology and observable reality, which honestly begs a huge question for the reader.
Exactly. If you're listening to this and you're not religious, does this undertone invalidate the entire framework? Are you just reading a Trojan horse for theology?
So what does Powery conclude?
Even Powery, reading it explicitly to find those secular faults, concludes that it does not invalidate the work at all. He estimates the book is 98% of the way there.
Wow, 98%.
Yeah, the habits themselves. Proactivity, prioritizing important over urgent, empathetic listening, are universally, undeniably effective.
So Powery suggests that if you are a secular reader, you just view these concepts through the lens of human psychology, evolutionary biology, and cause and effect.
The architecture of the house is incredibly sound, even if you disagree with the original architect about who invented the concept of a brick.
I love that. The utility remains intact regardless of the origin story. So if we look back at the journey we've taken today, it's massive.
It really is.
We've gone from realizing we have to dig out the crumbling foundation of our character, moving from a mindset of dependence and blame to true independence by recognizing our power to choose our responses.
We've learned to manage our time by preventing fires rather than just constantly fighting them.
We've opened our emotional bank accounts, disciplined ourselves to genuinely diagnose before we prescribe our logic, and combined our unique strengths to create synergy.
And we've committed to never being too busy sawing to stop and sharpen the blade.
It is not a checklist to finish over a weekend. It is a lifelong upward spiral of continuous growth.
It's a completely different paradigm for navigating human friction.
But as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on, something that wasn't explicitly debated in the source material, but builds right off this core idea of effectiveness.
That's right.
The 7 habits are essentially a masterclass in utility. They teach you exactly how to be highly effective at achieving a goal. But what happens if a person uses these incredibly powerful tools? Proactivity, synergy, empathetic listening to relentlessly pursue a goal that is fundamentally unethical or harmful.
Oh, that's dark.
Right. Can a villain be highly effective? Or do the habits themselves, by demanding deep empathy and requiring a win-win mindset, naturally course-correct a person toward the good? Does true effectiveness actually require a universal moral compass? Or is it just a high-powered engine that will drive whichever way you steer it?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. If you give a crumbling foundation a solid steel reinforcement, what kind of house are you ultimately choosing to build on it?
Something to mull over the next time you find yourself reaching for a quick cosmetic bucket of paint instead of doing the hard work in the dirt.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. Keep sharpening that saw, and we'll catch you next time.